Sup, y'all? I am your host, Tayler Onion, and this is Hang Time, where we focus on amplifying the stories of women in sports. We are back this week, not with a guest, but with a look back on the great episodes we've had so far in 2025, 21 to be exact. Give a shout out to our podcast studio, Bucket List Podcast Studios here in St. Louis, who's helped add video and kind of up our game when it comes to podcasting on the latter half of this year. But like I mentioned, we are going to do things differently today. We're going to take some time to look back at some of our favorite clips, our favorite moments from those 21 episodes. So without further ado, from our episode with Dr. Ashlesha Lokhande.
Well, I think Bloom Pod was such a neat podcast, to be honest. Like, I listened to so many stories of people I knew and people I did not know. And the way I would describe it, honestly, is like ordinary people in college athletics and beyond who were doing extraordinary things. So first of all, thank you for doing that, because I got to know so many people through that. But as you make this transition, can you kind of share like the inspiration behind rebranding the Bloom Pod into Hang Time and what took place there?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for saying that. So Hang Time, the rebranding, the evolution, if you will, really came, I would say, first and foremost from you nudging me. And I know I think it started before Women Leaders, which was in October of 24. But I know we spent a lot of time in Baltimore talking about that. I think that's actually where you told me that you were listening to me on walks, and that's why I had to get back to it.
That is correct. Yep.
Right. But I think the thing to me that really, kind of lit a fire under my butt in terms of wanting to dedicate free time back to getting into this was you said something to me. You texted me. Do you still have the screenshot of it?
I do actually. I won't read the whole thing, but I did say that you need to get on it because the world was waiting.
Yeah, that hit me square in the chest, right in the mouth. And so,
That's what I did.
yeah, that's what you do. Since I've known you, we go back, I think 10 years now, Ash. Yeah, so you sent that to me, and I was like, ooh, it's one of those texts that you get from somebody who you love and respect, and you're like, okay, they're right. Let me get going on this. And so spent a lot of time obviously thinking through what does that look like. Kind of tossed around the idea, and Ash has, I'll tell anybody who's tuning in now that Ash poor Ash, her inbox and her texts have been blown up by me since she has been pushing me to do this. Like, what do you think about this? What about this logo? What about this series name? But, I went back and forth a long time on whether should it still be the Bloom Pod, and this can be a special series. If you do go back and listen to that last episode with LCJ, you hear me talk about the next season is going to be really different. And at that time, I thought that, let's see, 2 years ago would have still been within the window of the 50th anniversary of Title IX.
Right.
And my plan was to do a series that highlighted the history of Title IX. What did that mean? Essentially share some of my dissertation research. But it's taken shape kind of in a different way. And so I think the rebranding right now, comes at this time when women in sports are finally getting a lot of the attention that they have deserved forever. And there are several things that have kind of, set that in motion. From our episode with Camber Clemence, one of the authors of TOGETHXR's Play It Forward book.
Overall, I think that the book's message in general is that women who play sports are so much more than the sport that they play. Mm-hmm. And, you can have these conversations about, Caitlin Clark changed the game, right? Angel Reese changed the game. Paige Beckers changed the game. Cheryl Miller changed the game. Cheryl Swoops changed the game. Like, all these women do absolutely change the game. But at the end of the day, I think what we're seeing more is the storytelling aspect of who women and girls are in their sport outside of just being an athlete.
Why do you think it has taken this long for people to realize that there is power in the storytelling of women as athletes, as coaches, as just additions to the world of sport. It seems like men obviously have had those stories told for such a long time. What do you think is the reason for that delay?
Misogyny. I
Let's just
mean, if
simplify
we're
it.
gonna put it
Yeah.
in one word, but outside of that, I think that there is some very real trepidation around sharing these stories, because if you look in the comment section of, any news outlets, Instagram, when it's about women's sports, there's so much vitriol there. I do feel like it's slowly getting better, but I used to not be able, I was like, I'm not even gonna click these comments. I know they're gonna be so brutal. And so I think there's definitely, trepidation from journalists, from outlets, media conglomerates to talk about it, because the backlash of it was so intense. And I just think at the end of the day, for media outlets specifically, it felt like, was there a return on investment in talking about women's sports? And they didn't feel like there was. And now some of them are a little late to the party, because there obviously is.
From our episode with Tori Niemann, Assistant AD at Clemson University for Student Athlete Development. Broadly, like as you're thinking about building programs, what are your kind of foundational topics?
But I really think it's the identity piece. You have to help current student athletes see themselves as a whole person. And I think a lot of us, if you played a college sport, you can relate to feeling like I am a basketball player. I am number 21, right? Where we know you're so much more than that. So sometimes in student athlete development, we really have to find a way to help the student athlete see all of their parts and how all of their parts fit together. So I think it's really hard for me personally. I'm very fortunate to work in a really well-supported, fun team environment, our department. But there's got to be the career components. There's got to be the leadership components. You find yourself in service, so being able to do some community service. But I don't think you can really focus on one thing without focusing on the identity piece. If we aren't building the confidence and the competence within our student athletes, it really doesn't matter.
From our episode with Malik from Parity. So going back to kind of, again, the business of women's sports right now and sponsorship, look into that. What do you think that brands are getting right? What do you think that brands are getting wrong when it comes to either working with the leagues, these new women's leagues, or with athletes individually?
Well, and like I said, just my word, but I think one thing they're getting wrong is like treating women's sports as like a corporate responsibility rather than marketing. Just in this climate, I think that's a bad idea to do. And two, just in general, I don't think when it comes to any type of ROI, it's hard to prove that when you present it as charity. And just being in just business acumen, you learn that as you go. And sports is no different, right? Presented as a business. That's why sports business is huge. There's so much money funneling through it, from food and beverage to apparel to media rights to you name it, action figures. But it's a business and it's not a charity. So I think framing women's sports just as you would frame men's sports, asterisk, because it's a little different in the way you would, but framing it as big business is where I think they should be, and where they're going wrong is treating it as a corporate responsibility.
From our episode with Dr. Elizabeth Tayler, Associate Professor at Temple University. Why do you think, aside from the industry's unwillingness to change, why do you think that burnout and disengagement are so common in sport roles?
Yeah. So I'll share an example from a participant in a study. So a couple of years ago, we did a project where we interviewed athletic department employees and their partners. And I was talking to a participant who was an assistant AD of marketing. And he was talking about kind of this shift in his perspective as an employee and also as a leader. And he was sharing an experience where they recently hired kind of an entry-level marketing coordinator. And about 2 months in, he was doing just like an informal conversation over some coffee, saying like, how's it going? Like, share your experience. Seems like you're really fitting in, kind of finding your groove. How's it going? And the employee replied and was like, I love it. Everything about it. I just wish we didn't have to work until 7 p.m. every night. And the participant was like, what do you mean? We don't have to work until 7 p.m. every night. Like, that's not required. And she was like, the employee was like, well, you do. You're here until 7 o'clock every night. And so I feel like I have to be here until 7 o'clock every night. And so the entry level employee shared, like, even if I'm done with my work at 5, I sit at my desk until 7, just like online shopping or on my phone. I try to appear busy because you're busy. And so the culture was suggesting to her that she had to be there until 7. And so it's kind of this, like, we're not modeling great behavior as sport leaders, right? And part of it may be as an athletic director or a senior leader or a head coach, you maybe make more money so you can afford to have a nanny, or your partner can stay home and doesn't have to work and they can do more of the childcare and the housework, that sort of thing. Whereas folks who are entry level and mid management don't have that same ability. So they're at work for 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 21 days in a row. And then they go home and they have to do everything outside of work. And maybe that looks like childcare or cleaning a house or care for elderly parents, or maybe they are single and want to hang out with their friends, but they're feeling like they can't do that because they're working until 8 or 9 o'clock every night. So I think what we consider like typical work family conflict, that's not what everyone experiences, but everyone does experience that, like, want to do something outside of work. They want to ride their Peloton, they want to go on vacation, they want to, whatever it is. It looks different for everyone. But when the culture is suggesting you have to be here till 7 o'clock every night, it poses a challenge for kind of that opportunity to engage in work outside of, or activities outside of work.
From our episode with Kristina Miner, Senior Counsel at Husch Blackwell. If you can possibly put it in some sort of a nutshell, how has the landscape shifted since even just last year's report?
Yeah, I mean, I think the landscape has shifted in the last 4 or 5 weeks, much less the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, name, image, likeness, and employment from whether or not student athletes or employees, like those conversations have been happening for years. And I think we've kind of been dancing around, I say we, industry-wide, have been kind of dancing around, like, what exactly does that mean? And what do we have to do one way or the other? So that hasn't gone away. I think what's very new is this onslaught of lawsuits by individuals that are essentially using the courts. And I'm not saying anybody's a bad person, they shouldn't be doing it. And again, we can get into that. There's a reason, for all of this, good, bad, or indifferent. But the lawsuits for individuals challenging NCAA rules or waivers, which we had never seen. So there used to be an agreement that these are the rules, everyone agrees more or less, and you stay kind of within your process. And then when you reach the end of the line and no more appeals, like, okay, you might not get what you want, but that's the end of it. Mm-hmm. And now courts are being treated as like a second appeal. And it's not, and some of the lawsuits that we're seeing and some of the decisions that are coming out and preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders, it's not necessarily saying the NCAA did something illegal. The decision was, I don't like it. I disagree with the NCAA, so student athlete can have more eligibility. Now that is very much a watered down version of kind of what's happening, but that's what people are seeing. And so all you need is one person to think, oh, okay, if I don't like the decision, I'll exhaust my appeals, then I'll go sue, and then I'll get a judge to just give me my eligibility back. It's a lot more complicated than that, but results-wise, like, that's what it looks like, which kind of triggers others to kind of go and kind of ask for the same thing in different states and different jurisdictions. So now you have this just state by state, court by court. What is the rule? We don't really know.
From our episode with Dr. Lacee Carmon-Johnson, the Director of Basketball Advancement for the Toronto Raptors. For folks who maybe are in that space and who are wanting to say yes more, what advice would you give to them on, like, what to say yes to versus what to say no? How do you sort through those things? Because everything seems like a great opportunity at some point, but not all of them are the best opportunity for you as an individual. And so maybe talk through your process of how you figure out what's what.
It's really figuring out your priorities, and obviously priorities change, they shift, even during various points of the season for me. Like I'm not going to take speaking engagements in the middle of the season unless I am legitimately already in that city. If it requires me to travel and I've already been on the road for 2 weeks away from my kids, like I'm probably not going to go unless it's something that I'm taking my entire family and we're going to make, as a trip opportunity. So it's lining out those priorities and being clear and then sticking to them. Because sometimes it's like, oh, well, I can get this money, or I can get in front of this person, or I can do this. All money ain't good money, and all connections ain't good connections. So what's important to you, and stop being afraid to say no. Y'all, stuff will circle the block for you. If it's meant for you, it's going to come back for you every time. So the timing of right now doesn't always have to be right now. And it's okay to say no. Give yourself the breathing room to just rest, to relax, hustle. You can hustle later, relax now.
From our episode with Dr. Jen Fry, author and founder of JenFryTalks. First of all, what inspired you to write this book? I said no. Well, let's start there. I won't ask you layered questions on this. We'll keep it single to one. So what inspired you to write the book?
So first off, as a speaker, one of the things that people say is that you have to have a book. Like the top speakers have a book. And that was a thing of, if my goal is to be on the top stages, then I have to have a book. Like that just really became very obvious when I did the research and really making this move to broaden outside of sports. I need to have a book. I think the second thing, so the title at first was going to be called Kind Asshole, because I consider myself a kind asshole. I'm not nice. I try and be really kind, but baby, sometimes it comes out. And so that was kind of the title, was Kind Asshole, How to Have Backbone and Boundaries Without Being a Jerk. And then I'm not sure if you know the author Lovey Jones. She wrote Little Troublemaker. So. Okay. She's also a speaker. Yeah. So she had a book academy. And so I was at this point where I had the goal of saying, okay, I'm going to write this book. And my goal was to have it done, the first draft, by the end of 24. So I had this first draft. And a lot of times, I think what scares people from writing books is that people are like, you have to, have your space clear and the candles going and the birds chirping. When people said to write your dissertation, you have to have all this stuff. And I was like, nah, I'm writing this. I'm doing voice to text when I'm driving. Like I am randomly putting notes everywhere. Like that's how I did mine. And so I finished it to a point, and I felt like some of these editors, for what I was getting, I was like, it's just a little too expensive. And if you know me, I'm trying to do everything by myself. And so I, from that point, I was kind of in a way lost, because I was like, okay, I don't know what my next step is, what this looks like. And I saw the ads for a book academy, listened to the thing. I was like, this is it. And I went to it, and it really gave me like the clearness that I needed. And so, we had conversations on the title. I got feedback, and they were like, if you want to sell this to schools, Amazon, other stuff, you're going to have to change the title because you don't have the following to be able to cuss in the title. And that makes sense, because actually I was at speaking engagement. Someone came up with like, would this be good for high schoolers? I can say yes now.
Right.
And so that's what led me to it, because I felt like in doing this conflict work, the amount of people that just can't say no to stuff. And they are sitting here resentful, hating life, upset, because they are unwilling to make someone upset. They're afraid to be like, well, if I say no to going over to Taylor's house for Thanksgiving, she might be mad at me. So I'll just go. And now I'm over there upset as hell, hating life, because I was so worried about you being upset with me that now you're actually upset with me because I'm being kind of a jerk over there.
Right.
And so really trying to help people, especially women, be able to gain the control and the self-advocacy in their life, to be able to say no, to be able to set boundaries.
From our re-released episode with Holly Stalcup of the College Football Playoff, the director of game operations and stadium operations for the biggest of all the shows in college football, right? So what's your experience been as a woman in the field And then what are some ways that you are trying to create space for other women in the field as you've advanced your career?
Yeah, you know, I've been fortunate that I've been surrounded by great females in the industry, and CFP is one of those. There's many females in many directorial roles, so that's amazing to see. I think, you know, a big thing that I've always remembered is own your seat at the table, whether it be CFP or my time at Illinois. I was given that opportunity because of my work and what I did. And so I need to remember that and know that if I am the only female at the table, I'm there for a reason. And I worked hard to get there. And so I'm going to own that seat and own that moment that I am in.
From our episode with Sandy Cross, the recently named Vice President for People and Culture of the PWHL. Firsthand, some of the leadership philosophies that you employ at the Accelerator Summit. But can you share maybe some experiences that have shaped your leadership philosophies and some of the ways that you view things in your role?
One of my main leadership philosophies or approaches is the idea of having an others first mindset. And that was something that was really instilled in me starting from a very young age by my parents, and just watching them, how they conducted themselves, not only with the three of us as their children, but how they led in their lives and in the community and in their church, etc. So this idea of an others first mindset, I don't think you can ever go wrong. Like if you try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, like really do it. And the idea of perspective taking, and certainly you need to also balance the best interests of the business. You know, you can't be too others first and leave everything on the table, if you will. But if you start with that others first mindset in any situation, I have found it to serve me and serve the business very well. So I would put that at the top of my list of the leadership philosophies. And then on a daily basis, and you asked about the day-to-day earlier, I'm really anchored by our shared values and truly trying to have that guide everything I do from a business and personal and behavioral perspective. Like it's just been such a solid anchor. And prior to the shared values, certainly we had a mission. We've had our mission hasn't wavered in 100+ years. And we had some people on the team at the time who were doing great work. They might have been killing it, but they were jerks in the process. The behavior was very poor. And our CEO just was not going to have that. So hence the development of the shared values and agreeing on, okay, if you're going to be part of the PJ of America team, which is such a privilege, you're going to behave in a certain way. It's going to be expected.
From our episode with Dr. Janelle Wells, an associate professor at the University of South Florida and co-founder of WellsQuest. What are some of the most compelling insights from your gender-based research as it pertains to sports?
One I would definitely say would be Eagly's work. In the psychology space of the gender bind. Some will say, hey, it's leadership stereotypes versus gender stereotypes. Women have been expected. Our gender stereotype is that we should be nurturing, right? We should be assistants. We should be very communal in our service, right? How we show up. That's essentially expected of us. Where men typically, and yes, I'm using it on a binary because that's how the history and the research has been done. They're expected to be assertive, decisive, decision makers. And so there's been a conflict. A woman does exhibit those leadership styles. She's at a contrast in how she's expected to behave as a woman. And so she's evaluated very different. And we do this unconsciously. And then I would say it's even magnified when we're in a male prevalent industry such as sport.
From our episode with Jessica Poole, the owner and founder of the Jessica Poole Communications Collective and the GM for the Chicago Tempest of Women's Elite Rugby. You think about a new league like this, and when you think about a new business like this, visibility and storytelling are kind of the two biggest pieces in terms of helping you be able to scale that and get the word out and all these things. Why do you think that for women's sports specifically, storytelling and just more of the authenticity? Again, I'm thinking of Alona Mar. I'm thinking of what the media did with the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese kind of rivalry, whether it actually existed between the two of them or whether the media blew that up, and that's now obviously benefited the W. Why do you think those types of stories and authenticity are so crucial for the growth of women's sports?
Well, I think it's for me, it comes down to two words: relatability and access, right? So I would tell people this all the time in the college space. The beauty of women's sports is that a little girl can go and get an autograph after a game of a women's basketball team.
Yep.
It doesn't happen on the men's side like that. And so I think for me, and I'm proof of that. I mean, I grew up going to Michigan women's basketball games, and I still have posters signed from all of the players that played there when I was growing up, because that's what they did after games. That's what they wanted to do after games. And so I think access is really important. And then relatability. Like I'll use Alona Mar. Alona Mar, her authenticity, like when she gave her SB speech and she had it written out and she's like, going through and like just she's just somebody that you can see yourself in. And I think that's really important. We know that young girls drop out of sports at a 2-to-1 rate around middle school, and that we know that data. And I think it's really important to see yourself in someone, to give yourself a role model. And I think for whatever reason, that's just what women's sports do.
From our episode with Katy Benson, a manager of premium services with St. Louis City SC. I have to imagine that excitement and that opportunity also comes with its own set of challenges, especially being a relatively new franchise. What have you run into as you've kind of started to, sell more stuff, as you reach that point where the suites are sold out, all of those things?
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, there's definitely challenges with being sold out. I think probably one of the biggest challenges here in St. Louis is the comparison to the other teams. St. Louis is such a huge sports town, which is great. A lot of my clients are also clients of the Cardinals and the Blues. And so it's differentiating ourselves from them and having them kind of learn how we work, how soccer works. It's very different than, also teams that have been around for so long. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest challenges. We can't show that proof of value yet. We can't do those things where, people have been going to Cardinals games for 30, 40, 50 years.
Right.
But that also brings opportunity. And like I said, it brings, the fact that we don't have those traditions yet, and then we can be creative and have good stories and have our relationships that we've made, have that really be what boosts, our clientele and like brings them along from the beginning as part of like our story.
From our episode with Denise-Schilte-Brown, the head coach of the 2025 USL Super League champions, the Tampa Bay Sun FC. What made you want to make the jump from college into the Tampa Bay Sun head coach role that you're in now?
I just think you develop as a coach. You put so much time and effort into it. And in college athletics, there's a lot of other moving pieces that factor into that job, and I really loved those moving pieces for years. I liked the recruiting. I liked the player management, the academic advising, like helping, just keeping your girls on track and honestly, like pouring into the future selves or the future version of themselves. That was like pretty awesome for me. But I really loved the idea of it being all about football, just the preparation and the time being all about the tactics, preparation, and picking elite players and being able to manage, those personalities too. I wanted to challenge myself and see, how I could fare in that environment.
From our episode with Dr. Kyra Kendrick of the Pro Sports Assembly. Do you have any final advice for folks who are coming up, who are interested in working in professional sports?
Oh, man. There's so many nuggets people have dropped on me over the years, but I had to whip out my notes because my memory is a little, shaky as I get older. But I think my favorite one that someone once told me is that giving is an opportunity to receive. I think that we are very much in a space as a society where it is all about me, 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 me. What can you do for me? And a lot of the reasons, even when I think back to my own career journey, not one time did I apply for the job without someone reaching out to me first saying, you should apply for this job. I'm going to recommend you for this job. And that's because I was a giver. I mean, I'm still a giver, but throughout the journey, you know, I was a giver. Sure. I understood that as you give and pour into things and places and people, those things give back to you. And you know, it doesn't always feel that way. You know, there's certain things that what I you know, I would like to achieve that maybe I haven't done yet. But what I do know is that when I show up in that way, I always get back tenfold.
From our episode with Jennifer Tussey and Jada Humphrey of the 6-time national champion St. Louis Slam.
Jada's jersey is now in the Football Hall of Fame. So, you know, as being the MVP of the game, you know, that's obviously a great cherry on top of the day.
Yeah, and then Carrie's was in there the year before, so it's like we're taking over that piece of it. So it's just cool to see that there's multiple players in this one organization that are Hall of Famers and more to come.
Yeah. I love that you weren't even gonna mention that. Your teammates bring it like such a casual flex.
Make sure it was everyone's aware.
By the way, my jersey is in the football.
I was like, I don't know how that's gonna sound on here, but
I would be shouting it from the rooftops.
Yeah, true.
From our episode with Jess Boja, the head coach of the new Upshot League team, the Jacksonville Waves. Can you tell us, maybe let's start by just sharing what the league is and how it came to be?
Yeah, so I think the best way we describe it is it's an opportunity league. You know, Donna Orender, who was our founder, was the former WNBA commissioner. She was the president of the PGA Tour when Tiger Woods was coming up. She has a long list, as well as being an accomplished basketball player herself. She saw an opportunity, had the business model. It was the right time, the right place, and the right opportunity. And she has been working on this for years, along with Zoyer Sports, who is our ownership group. They also own other teams across the country. And they partnered up, and they thought that, like I said, it was the right time, it was the right place, it was the right opportunity. You know, we speak a lot. There's a stat out there that people speak to that over the last 3 years, there has been 120 people drafted to the WNBA.
Wow.
Of those 120, 20 people have made a roster. So what that says is not, you know, it says there's not enough opportunity out there. And we hope to provide those spaces to continue to grow the game. The women's basketball and women's sports in general is on an exponential drive right now. And we hope to be a part of that.
From our episode with Ashima Chopra, the CEO and founder of Fanverse. It's so interesting to see how kind of multifaceted it is. And I'm so excited to watch, you know, and continue to see the things that Fanverse uncovers in that space too. You touched on a little bit kind of the role of AI. When we think about AI, AR, augmented reality, even community-driven media, there's so many influencers right now too that are taking media content from like the big media companies and re-spinning it with their own kind of nuanced thoughts, myself included. How do you think those things drive or have the potential to shape the future of women's sports media and women's sports fandom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like touching upon even AR for a brief second and just like immersive tech, I think we're seeing this, and I love that word that you used of multifaceted, because I think female fans are not a monolith. We're not secondary. We are very multifaceted, and that's, you know, that could be a whole conversation in itself. But we're seeing how AR and immersive tech can really create new fan experiences. And so to your point of how multifaceted we are, where it's the lifestyle, it's the culture, it's the fashion, it's business. I think that AI, AR tech has such an incredible opportunity to be able to enhance that and integrate into that.
from our episode with the Edwardsville High School girls flag football coaches. And do you think there's one defining moment that has kind of led to football? We're in this space now where football is starting to feel not just like a men's sports realm, right? Like there's girls flag. We're seeing more female officials in the NFL even and across the board, like college all the way down. I'm wondering if there's anything y'all can think of that you're like, oh, this was the moment, like when we saw the first NFL female official and then it started to get bigger, or if it's just been kind of this trickle effect in your from your perspective.
Well, I think like my surface level small life, I have a 7-year-old and she was probably 5, and so she's been around Slam her entire life. So her dad put the Super Bowl on at the time, and she was like, "Oh, boys play football?" And I was like, "Hell yeah," you know. But like that is it. The next generation, because the next generation of dads, when it's, hey, flag football, I'm not just signing my son up, I'm going to sign my daughter up. So I think that'll trickle into homes, and there'll still be some parents that are like, no, hey, it's not happening. We did not have those parents. We didn't have those parents. At least they didn't exist. I mean, they thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
From our episode with Dr. Risa Issar, the Director of Research and Insights at Parity. I'm going to jump in a little bit deeper to some of the research that y'all are doing. So I think it was last week, you released the latest round of research on women's sports fans, specifically Gen Z. And so that report, as I was kind of glancing through it, a couple of big things stood out, but one in particular was the projected global spending power of $12 trillion with a T, trillion dollars by 2030. So that gives you the idea right there, like Gen Z, right, is the next kind of big thing to focus on, not just for women's sports, but for all, for anybody who's marketing literally anything. This is the kind of, audience generation, whatever, that you want to start looking at. What are some of the things that stood out to you aside from that $12 trillion, but in that research?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most fun thing is I loved when I was just kind of typing away and I was like, oh, Gen Z is born between 1997 and 2012. That's really interesting. Those are really pivotal years in women's sports history in the US. For those of you who haven't read the report, you don't keep a timeline of women's sports history in your brain. 1997 is when the WNBA tipped off. It was the summer of 1997. And 2012, that fall, is when the NWSL announced that they were founding and that they would be launching the next year. So 2 kind of huge moments. And those are the bookend years for Gen Z as a generation. And so for us, right, we think it's really fun to think of them, and not just fun, but somewhat accurate to think of it, pretty accurate to think of them as the women's sports generation. I think of it as like, this is what happens when women's sports is normal, not novel.
And from our episode with the founders and co-owners of Kansas City's first women's sports bar, The Dub. Why do you think, like, why is the women's sports bar movement just as important as what we're seeing in women's sports growth right now?
Yeah, I know Rach has a thought on this too, but I think that it's, everything we've been saying so far, it's about community. It's about being able to find your people, or just, women's sports bars are special in that they've kind of taken on this safe place kind of feeling. I've been to I've been to Denver, I've been to Minneapolis, I've been to San Francisco, and they all have that same kind of like welcoming vibe when you walk in. And so I think that for members of any walk of life, of any kind of community, however you identify, having a space that is safe to walk into is so important. And so, not only for the LGBTQ plus community that we're a part of, but also for people who maybe have always wanted to get into sports but don't know how to begin, because walking into a traditional sports bar feels intimidating. We wanted to create that community and that place to kind of allow for that. I mean, sports was so formative in my life growing up, and it definitely contributed to who I am today and made me a better person. And so I think that there's a lot of power in just kind of getting to know that community, and so being able to create that was really great.
All right, listeners, that wraps up our favorite moments from 2025. We will see you back in 2026. Until then, you can follow along at HangTimeP0D and HangTimeP0D.com. We'll see you next time.